All right, joining us now to broaden this out, Michael O'Hanlon, Director of Research for Foreign Policy at Brookings. We also have Chad Wolf, Executive VP at the America First Policy Institute and former Acting Secretary for Homeland Security in the first Trump administration. Chad, we're guessing here. We understand that nobody actually knows what's going to happen. What would you ascribe as various outcomes on the Iranian side from here?
Well, I think as it relates to the homeland, I think DHS is doing the right things. Anytime there's an incident like this, you go shields up, sort of a phrase that we use there, mainly from a cybersecurity perspective. That's probably the most likely vector for a counterattack of some kind. But we know, look, we know that they have their proxies here inside the United States, such as Hezbollah and others. So I think there's a number of things that U.S. officials need to look at when it comes to threats here in the homeland to U.S. citizens.
So, Michael O'Hanlon, key question here, because we don't have the final damage assessments, particularly for Fordo, or at least they haven't been made public. And there are other sites that were not part of these strikes last night that are part of Iran's nuclear program. What happens if you didn't see enough of that nuclear program effectively demolished? What is the U.S.'s next step then?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I agree with Secretary Wolf that the most likely response here is by Iran is probably cyber, because to go and start assassinating or, terrorizing people on American soil runs the distinct possibility of an expansion of the U.S. target set and renewed American kinetic attacks. And I think President Trump's been pretty clear on that. So I think realistically, we probably will see things that are a little bit more indirect and de-escalatory, but probably not passive. So that would be my overall assessment there. In terms, however, of what we've accomplished, I want to be very agnostic. I really have no idea what we've done, especially at Fordo. When I study all the data that's publicly available on the massive ordnance penetrator, and I look at the amount of rock that Fordo is buried beneath, I have no confidence that we got to those centrifuges. And also, Vice President Vance, I think, clearly stated that we have no confidence we got to the highly enriched uranium stock. So there's a distinct possibility that Iran is going to go for the bomb all out at this point and maybe get it sooner than they would have otherwise. By the way, this is not meant to criticize the U.S. action today. I think President Trump had a tough call, or this weekend. He had a tough call. There were arguments in favor of what he decided. And there's no good options when dealing with Iran and its nuclear weapons program. Presidents have been struggling with this for more than 2 decades. But I would be surprised if we really declawed Iran on the nuclear front. And I think their number one response is probably going to be to pursue a nuclear weapon.
Chad, I want to go back to this notion of sleeper cells. When we're talking about sleeper cells in the U.S., what specifically does that look like? How much intelligence does the U.S. intelligence community have on that? You mentioned cyber. How much of this is cyber versus actual physical, potentially domestically based terrorist attacks? How to think about this risk?
Sure. Let's start with sleeper cells. I mean, we know that there is a number of members of Hezbollah and Hamas here in the United States. They are known to law enforcement. Law enforcement tracks these individuals. And so the question becomes, do they do something in response to this? There's also the ability to inspire Iran to inspire U.S.-based individuals, U.S. citizens in some cases, to do violent acts kind of randomly that we have seen over time as well. Those are much more difficult, obviously, to guard against. The cyber capabilities of Iran are limited, but they are there, right? You don't have to. You're not on the battlefield per se. It doesn't take a large military force, and you can certainly hide behind, keyboards and the like. So I think that the likely response, and we saw this in Soleimani after his death, a number of cyber attacks from Iran in 2020. So that is likely going to be the attack vector.
Yeah, and Michael, there is a variable here that we haven't talked about yet in this program, and that is China, because almost all the oil that Iran exports is bought by China or maybe one of its proxies. And China does not want the price of oil to go up, just like the United States does not, and they certainly do not want to have any kind of a shortage of oil because suddenly shipping is impacted. What is the China role in all of this ultimately, because they are a huge economic partner to Iran?
Right. I agree with your analysis, which implies that there are good arguments on all sides not to let this escalate too far. I don't know how firmly China is pushing its view and talking to Iran and saying, please do not cause trouble in the Strait of Hormuz. My guess, however, is that their analysis in Beijing is just like what you said, and they would very much hope that this thing toned down. And, that's often China's role, to sort of let others do the hard work and just say nice things. With all due respect to Chinese friends, they're not going to have to solve this problem fundamentally. They can have their cake and eat it too. Let Iran continue to pursue a nuclear weapon, but say they're against it, but say they're against disruption to oil. So they can say all the right things and not have to solve the problem. But I agree, to the extent that they are speaking to Tehran, I think they are in favor of de-escalation or a limited response, not a big blow-up.
Michael, it's that phrase, the enemy you know, right? So with President Trump sort of shifting gears and floating the possibility on social media tonight of regime change, if that were to be a scenario that plays out, how destabilizing or not would that be for Iran and the region right now?
Well, the first thing I would say is a lot of American presidents have had these kinds of aspirations. Some have actually acted on it. Usually it's been a lot harder and a lot more uncertain than we expected. So obviously with Iraq and Afghanistan, we did accomplish regime change, but at enormous cost. And President Trump's own political history is partly in opposition to those very interventions. Also, in the Iraq War in 2003, we thought we had a way to target Saddam Hussein. We thought we had exquisite intelligence on his location. We were wrong. And yes, we ultimately got him, but we also wound up with a $3 trillion military operation in the process. So I don't tend to subscribe to easy talk about regime change. That would be my top answer to your question. If somehow it happened, I'd be in favor of it. I just don't think it's going to be nearly as easy as the president's implying.